I'm so fascinated to talk to you at many different levels. I have been following and actually commenting on this Israeli Hamas situation since October 7th, actually, and have been very critical of what's been going on recently with media and world leaders as well, kind of bailing on Israel and being, I think, kind of weak kneed about their position in protecting themselves against Hamas, who's still holding hostages. And I've been very critical of what's happening at some of our American universities as well. So um, was not surprised to see Iran do what they did, but I was very pleased to see how ineffective it was. And I know you've got some history with this Iron Dome that I'm interested in talking about. Were you surprised to see the attack from Iran?
No, I was not surprised to see an attack from Iran. And let me pause before I get into some more of the details on what happened on Saturday, just to tell you that I was honored to serve as the senior advisor to multiple secretaries of defense at the Pentagon. Served both Bob Gates and Leon Panetta the opportunity to work for one Secretary of Defense who was originally appointed by a Republican and another Secretary of Defense appointed by a Democrat. And what we knew at the Pentagon and continue to know today is that our security for our nation, the United States, as well as for our ally Israel, it goes above politics on the military level. And I appreciated that when I worked for Secretary Gates as well as for Secretary Panetta, and working on the U.S.-Israel defense relationship, including the training jointly against ballistic missile attacks like we saw on Saturday was something that I was honored to do for 6 years. So in answer directly to your question, was I surprised by an Iranian attack on Saturday? No, but I think many were surprised by the breadth of the attack. We can go through some of the numbers if you would like to. But let me just say from the outset that I was most pleased with our joint efforts, the United States and Israel together, having the successful ability to counter those ballistic and cruise missiles that were being fired from Iran at Israeli civilians and Israeli towns. Because of all of the training that we have done together and all of the technology that the United States and Israel works on together, both in the past when I served with the Pentagon and continues to do so now.
I'm glad to hear you say that because when we get to military and it goes above politics, it makes me feel like we're, at least for that part of the time, focused on being Americans instead of Republicans and Democrats. And we need to remember we are all Americans.
I agree wholeheartedly. If it's okay with you, I just want to share some of the training that the United States and Israel does together to counter the rocket attacks, similar to the one that took place on Saturday.
I wish you would.
As we looked at what the Iranians did on Saturday, and we can talk about the background of the what I would say the Iranian false narrative as to why they wanted to attack Israel. They were arguably trying to retaliate for two of their generals being killed in Damascus. Those generals were, at least by reports in the press, working together with Hezbollah and Hamas to attack Israel. And the attack that was alleged to be committed by the Israelis, they haven't taken credit for it, although it certainly looked like their past actions similar to that. But let's talk about the actual attack on Saturday. The Iranians started the attack with several hundred slow-moving drones. And as we think about that in military terms, that was effectively a diversion. It was an attempt to get the Israeli air defenses, and of course, we worked very closely together with them, the United States and other partners, to detect any sort of attack coming in from Iran. And so those slow-moving drones took several hours to get there. The Iranians knew or had to have known that the radars from Israel as well as from United States military assets in the region would know they were coming. So that wasn't the point of the attack, even though they did have explosives on them. It was to swarm and to have a diversion that would lead the U.S. And Israeli counter systems to be occupied with those slow-moving drones, so they could fire over 100 ballistic missiles. And the number that I saw out of Israel and out of the spokesperson for the National Security Council, my friend Admiral John Kirby, the U.S. Navy, stating that there was 30 cruise missiles fired as well. And I mentioned earlier that I wanted to talk about some of the joint training that has taken place, but going back to the year 2009, and this is all in the public sphere, you can read about it in the press. The United States military trained with our allies in the Israeli Defense Forces, using several layers of missile defense to defend a scenario where missiles and rockets were fired from the east at Israel from an unknown country. That training proved to be very effective on Saturday. And we can go into some of the different levels that were used. But Israel has a multi-tiered counter-rocket and counter-missile system, and we've developed that with the Israelis and the United States. And pleased to see its effectiveness on Saturday, but of course, you and I both disappointed to see that it needed to be used.
Well, of course. So people understand. Talk about the different characteristics of the ballistic missiles and the cruise missiles. What were they dealing with? What are the difference between the two threats?
Yeah, very, very good question. So cruise missiles, they fly almost like an aircraft with accurate ability to target, and they can fly at high altitudes or low altitudes. And ballistic missiles are fired up into the atmosphere and then come down with still some ability to aim, but less effective and less aim than a cruise missile for your listeners, just at the most basic level. And the different levels or tiers, as they're called, of the counter missile and counter rocket system that Israel operates have to do with both the distance at which those are fired and the altitude that they fly. So the lowest, let's start with the top, actually. The top tier is a system that was developed between the United States and Israel, which is called the Arrow system. It's one that the United States and Israel have been working on for, over 25, almost 30 years now. And it was specifically designed for this type of interception. And if you look at the results from Saturday night, I haven't seen a full after-action report now that I'm in the private sector, but I have spoken with friends and colleagues at the Pentagon, and there were successful intercepts by the Israelis as well as by the United States military. And the Arrow system that was operated by the Israelis on Saturday night was able to intercept some missiles that were over 150 kilometers above the Earth. That is, if you think about the Arrow system going back to the days of President Reagan and Star Wars, something that the United States was not successfully employing. We now have the ability to do that, as do the Israelis via the Arrow system. The second level down, if we're going to speak about it on the next tier, is something that the Israelis operate called the David Sling. The David Sling uses a system to counter mid-range rockets and those ballistic missiles that we referred to. And the Israelis effectively use that as well. And then the third system is the one that I was honored to work on most specifically when I was at the Pentagon as the lead for, and that is the Iron Dome system. That is intended for short-range rockets. You earlier raised the fight and the war with Hamas in Gaza right now. Many of those rockets were fired out of Gaza at Israel for many, many years, but the Iron Dome can also be used effectively against the rockets that were fired and the missiles that were fired out of Iran if they come into the short range. So you start at the top tier with the Arrow. The mid-range is called the David Sling, and then the closest tier that's used for really smaller rockets but can be used for larger at a short range if they're not able to be hit sooner is the Iron Dome system.